very much. They were in the main room. I heard them dancing and laughing. Kaylee went upstairs and she screamed because someone was in the room and she ran downstairs. And I kept calling her name and she wouldn't answer. And I saw the guy. I just walked the door and then I ran downstairs. We don't know what's going on.
4 a.m. 4 students were asleep in a house just off campus. By the time the sun came up, none of them were alive. No forced entry, no broken windows, no screams that anyone remembers hearing. And the killer? A criminology PhD student, someone who was literally being trained in a classroom to analyze crime scenes just like the one he was about to create. This isn't a movie plot. This is a real case. Moscow, Idaho, November 13th, 2022. And the way it unfolds, from the murders to the arrest to the shocking twist in court, is stranger than most fiction. Let's get into it. Part 1. The town and the victims. Moscow, Idaho is the kind of town where nothing like this was supposed to happen. It's small, fewer than 25,000 people, and revolves almost entirely around the University of Idaho. For generations, students there felt safe enough to leave their doors unlocked at night. On King Road, just a short walk from campus, an off-campus rental house was home to 4 young people, about to become the center of a national tragedy. Kaylee Goncalves, 21, was athletic and close with her family, with a job already lined up after graduation. Maddie Mogan, 21, was warm and outgoing. Friends called her the glue that held their group together. Zana Kernodle, 20, was bubbly, family-oriented, and deeply in love with her boyfriend. Ethan Chapin, 20, was Zana's boyfriend, a triplet, close with his siblings, and known on campus for his easygoing personality. He simply stayed over that night. Part 2. The night. The night of November 12th looked ordinary. Kaylee and Maddie came home late after a night out. Zana and Ethan returned from a friend's place. 2 other roommates were also inside. Both survived. One later told investigators she woke around 4 a.m., heard noise, and thought she saw someone in a mask walking through the house. Too frightened to investigate, she locked her door and went back to sleep. That decision would haunt her for the rest of her life. By late morning, when nobody responded to calls or texts, panicked friends came over and called 911. What police found inside would be described as one of the most disturbing scenes officers there had ever encountered. All 4 students had been stabbed repeatedly, with extreme force, likely with a large fixed-blade knife. Combined, the victims suffered more than 100 stab wounds. Several were killed while still asleep, with no chance to defend themselves. Only Zana showed clear signs of resistance. Blood on her feet suggested she got up and tried to fight before being overpowered. 2 dogs in the house were left unharmed. Whoever did this was in and out in minutes, leaving almost no obvious trace. Almost. Part 3. The panic and the clue. Word of the murder spread instantly, and the entire country was rattled. A quiet college town that had never needed to lock its doors was suddenly living in fear. Parents drove hours to pick up their kids. Some students left campus entirely for the rest of the semester. Local gun stores reported a spike in sales. Every single person walking around Moscow was, for weeks, a potential suspect in the eyes of a terrified public. Online, amateur sleuths went into overdrive. Self-appointed internet detectives combed through the surviving roommate's social media, accused random locals, and targeted one of the victim's ex-boyfriends so aggressively that police had to publicly clear his name. A self-described psychic even went viral on TikTok, wrongly naming an innocent professor, a claim that led to a defamation lawsuit still working through appeals years later. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, real investigators were sitting on something they hadn't told the public yet. At the crime scene, tucked near one of the victims, police discovered a knife sheath, essentially a leather cover for a large folding or fixed blade knife. It should have been an ordinary piece of forensic evidence. Instead, it became the single biggest break in the entire case. Because on that sheath, forensic technicians found traces of DNA. At the same time, detectives quietly pulled cell phone tower data covering the area around the house. What they found was unsettling. A specific phone had connected to towers near that residence multiple times, late at night, for weeks leading up to the murders, almost as if someone had been circling the location, watching, before ever stepping inside. Then came the surveillance footage. Cameras from nearby homes and businesses picked up a white Hyundai Elantra driving past the house repeatedly in the hours before the killings, then speeding away from the area shortly afterward. Investigators now had a car, a phone pattern, and DNA. All they needed was a name to attach to it. Part 4. The suspect. That name came from more than 2,500 kilometers away. In Pennsylvania, Bryan Kohberger, 28, was a PhD student in criminology at Washington State University, roughly a 10-minute drive from the crime scene. He was being trained in exactly the kind of forensic science that would eventually be used to catch him. Crime scene behavior, offender psychology, how killers get identified and arrested. His personal vehicle, a white Hyundai Elantra, registered in his own name. Rather than move in immediately, investigators used a quieter method. During winter break, when Kohberger drove home to Pennsylvania, they collected trash left outside his family's home, legally considered abandoned property, so no warrant was needed. The DNA inside it matched the DNA on the knife sheath. On December 30th, 2022, 6 weeks after the murders, Bryan Kohberger was arrested at his parents' house. The reaction across the country was disbelief. A criminology student, someone who had spent years studying how killers get caught, was himself the killer. Professors described a bright but unusually intense student. Classmates recalled him as socially awkward and occasionally condescending. But almost nobody who knew him believed he was capable of something this violent. Part 5. The trial that never happened. This is where the story takes its biggest turn. For nearly 2.5 years, the case crawled through the legal system. Kohberger's defense team challenged the DNA methodology, the cell phone data, and how the trash had been collected, and pushed for a change of venue. A trial date was finally locked in for the summer of 2025, and the public braced for a long, headline-dominating courtroom battle. Then, on July 2, 2025, just weeks before that trial was set to begin, everything changed. Bryan Kohberger changed his plea to guilty on all counts, 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. In exchange, prosecutors agreed not to pursue the death penalty. In return, he gave up his right to ever appeal, a decision that is permanent and final. On July 23, 2025, Judge Stephen Hippler sentenced him to 4 consecutive life sentences, 1 for each victim, with no possibility of parole, plus an additional 10 years for burglary. He will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Inside that courtroom, the victims' families delivered gut-wrenching impact statements. Kohberger sat almost motionless through the hearing. When the judge gave him the chance to speak, he simply said he would respectfully decline. To this day, he has never offered an explanation, no stated motive, no confession beyond the plea itself. Just silence. Part 6. The unanswered questions. And that silence is exactly what makes this case so unsettling, because the details that have come out since sentencing only raise more questions, not fewer. After the plea deal, hundreds of pages of previously sealed police records were released to the public. Buried inside them was a striking detail. A friend of Kohberger's told investigators that back in October and November of 2022, right around the time of the murders, they noticed a fresh scratch on his face and injuries across his knuckles. Kohberger had reportedly explained it away as the result of a minor car accident. That same friend told police that in the days and weeks after the murders, Kohberger became noticeably more talkative than usual, describing him as behaving almost like someone who needed to get something off his chest, someone who wanted to vent but never quite said what about. Then, in January 2026, newly unsealed court filings revealed even more disturbing detail from the official autopsy reports. Combined, the 4 victims suffered over 150 stab wounds. Zana Kernodle was stabbed 67 times, Kaylee Goncalves 38 times, Madison Mogan 28 times, and Ethan Chapin 17 times. The wounds were concentrated heavily around the head, face, and neck, painting a far more personal and frenzied picture than the public had previously understood. He has never publicly explained why he did what he did. Given the finality of his plea deal and his consistent silence, he may simply never explain it at all. 4 young people, Kaylee, Maddie, Zana, and Ethan, who were building futures, making plans, and living completely ordinary lives just like anyone watching this video right now, had all of it taken from them in a single night, for reasons that still, to this day, remain completely unknown. Their families have said, again and again, that they don't just want justice, they want understanding. They want to know what could possibly drive another human being to walk into a house full of sleeping strangers and take that much from so many people in a matter of minutes. That answer may never come. The plea deal closed the legal chapter of this case permanently, but it left the emotional and psychological chapter wide open, and it's likely to stay that way for a very long time. If this case teaches us anything, it's that the greatest danger isn't always the obvious outsider lurking somewhere far away. Sometimes it's the person quietly studying exactly how crimes get solved, while secretly planning one of their own. If you found this breakdown informative, hit like, drop your theory down in the comments. What do you personally think his real motive was? And subscribe, because we bring you deeply researched, respectfully told true crime cases just like this one every single week.